Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a pretty high-tension analysis of a rapidly escalating geopolitical situation. We've pulled together a collection of some highly charged statements, strategic analyses, all focused squarely on the escalating rhetoric and military readiness claims between Iran and Israel.
That's right.
And this feels like a crucial moment where the threat of confrontation is sort of shifting from just a diplomatic possibility to, well, to actual military planning.
It absolutely is. And this is so much more than the standard political posturing we're often used to seeing. I mean, our sources detail specific, really detailed warnings coming from high-ranking Iranian military leaders. And they're not just words. They're outlining concrete, tangible steps both sides are taking that push the situation toward a confrontation.
Okay, and that adaptation, that's what we need to zoom in on here.
Exactly.
Our mission today is to unpack these key claims, put them in context with both the, intense internal pressure inside Iran and the very public external pressure from the U.S., and then try to understand what preparing for war really means in this specific volatile scenario.
And if you look across all the source material, what's really happening is that this heated political rhetoric is now meeting documented, detailed claims of military readiness.
So it's not just talk anymore.
Not at all. It turns the entire Middle East, often called this complex chessboard, into a genuinely high-stakes environment where, any single miscalculation could just trigger an unpredictable escalation.
Okay, so let's unpack this language then, because it starts at the very top of the Iranian military structure, and it is extremely serious.
It is.
Our source material centers on the commander of Iran's regular army, Major General Amir Hatami. He recently addressed the Iranian parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee.
And the specific words he used, the terminology in that address, that gives us the first crucial piece of context for Iran's whole strategic mindset right now.
Exactly. Hatami issued an explicit warning that Tehran considers the threat posed by what they officially call the Zionist regime, meaning Israel, to be real and existential.
And that word, existential, that is not a word you use lightly in international relations.
No.
It's absolutely not. I mean, in geopolitical terms, when you label a threat existential, it's incredibly significant. It immediately reframes the whole idea of national defense.
What does that mean in practice? It's not just, justifying buying a few more missiles, right?
No. It's a signal to the entire world, but just as importantly, to their own domestic audience.
A justification.
A justification for comprehensive, all-encompassing military action. It gives the government a license to mobilize huge national resources, redirecting the budget, speeding up R&D, maybe even mobilizing reserve forces, all under this banner of protecting the nation from total annihilation.
It's the ultimate domestic rallying cry.
It is.
And Hatami didn't leave any doubt about their seriousness. He gave a very clear quote. He said, "The threat from the Zionist regime against Iran is real, and that is why we take it seriously and prepare accordingly."
So it's clear. They view this preparation not as some theoretical wargaming.
No, it's a direct, necessary response to what they see as a perceived immediate threat.
And that preparation is detailed, it's specific. The sources confirm that the Iranian military sees this moment as much more than just political saber-rattling. They are claiming, actual physical structural changes have been made to their defense strategy.
The level of detail is unusual, though.
Yeah.
Why are they giving us a specific timeline, saying preparations have been made in the last 6 months? How does that connect to the previous conflict?
That 6-month timeline is the key. It's the link. We know exactly what conflict they're adapting from.
The 12-day war with Israel in June 2025.
Exactly. So this isn't a new conflict starting from scratch. It's an intense, focused period of correction and intensification following a very recent engagement. One that, according to the sources, exposed some specific vulnerabilities in Iran's defense.
Let's break those down. What were those vulnerabilities? The source material says that back in June 2025, Israel targeted 3 types of highly sensitive assets.
Right. High-ranking military leaders, nuclear scientists and facilities, and specific ballistic missile sites.
So when Hatami claims they're adapting to the type of threats, we can understand that to mean they're specifically trying to secure or disperse or harden those 3 critical areas.
And the logistical implications of doing that are just immense.
Right. Take the missile sites, for example. What does dispersing a major ballistic missile site even entail in just 6 months?
Well, it means moving away from large, centralized bunkers, which are frankly easier to target with specialized munitions.
Bunker busters, yeah.
To more complex, smaller, often mobile launch platforms that are hidden across a much wider geographical area. It requires massive engineering, digging new underground facilities, moving critical infrastructure. It's a very expensive, very disruptive strategic shift.
The goal being to eliminate that one single, highly valuable target. You can't hit a centralized command post if that command structure is decentralized and mobile.
Exactly. It forces an adversary like Israel to expend far more reconnaissance, far more resources for a much less certain outcome.
And the Iranian claim, which Khatami insisted on, is that these measures have actually been successful.
He says the Iranian armed forces are now much stronger and better prepared than they were before that June 2025 conflict. And that confidence, whether it's real or projected, is a key component of this whole escalation rhetoric.
And it's paired with an unmistakable threat of response. Khatami repeated the rhetoric that if the enemy makes a mistake, Iran will receive a decisive response.
And that they will cut off the hand of any aggressor.
It's that classic maximalist response.
It is. But, our sources also raise a critical question here. How do you verify this claim? Is 6 months of focused adaptation really enough to negate Israel's confirmed technological superiority and intelligence penetration?
That's a good question. Is the preparation entirely real? Or is the rhetoric also heavily designed for that internal audience, to project a sense of security and strength?
I think it's probably a mix of both. And it's worth noting this is a unified message. It's not just Khatami.
Right. The sources cite the Iranian Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh and the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghei echoing this same sentiment.
And Araghei stated explicitly that Iran is not seeking war, but is prepared for it. And even more prepared now than before, which tells us this preparedness is a point of diplomatic leverage as well.
Though it's important to acknowledge, Araghei did also mention being open to fair and mutually respectful negotiations.
Yeah.
So there's a small diplomatic door left ajar, at least in theory.
But given those enormous claims of strength, you'd assume the leadership must be confident they can control any regional fallout. But the sources show that confidence is actually rooted in something else.
Deep instability.
Deep instability. This is where we need to shift our focus from their external preparedness to their internal volatility.
And what's fascinating here is how this external threat is being actively used to manage the severe internal problems Iran is experiencing.
Yes.
These military claims are not happening in a vacuum. They come at a time of high regional volatility that's made much worse by massive, prolonged anti-government protests that have rocked Iran itself.
We're talking sustained protests across all 31 provinces, according to the sources. Thousands of arrests, documented violent repression. The regime's response isn't just a crackdown.
No, it's a strategic effort to immediately link that internal instability to those external enemies.
Exactly, to control the domestic narrative. The regime is labeling the demonstrators urban terrorists,
which equates internal dissatisfaction with hostile foreign plots.
And Major General Khatami's rhetoric fits this perfectly. He straight up accused the U.S. and Israel of orchestrating these protests, of deploying terrorist groups, even with alleged links to ISIS, to destabilize Iran.
This external framing is then backed up with claims of specific successes. Tehran claimed to have detained alleged militants with U.S. weapons.
It paints a picture for the Iranian people. We're under siege from abroad and from agents within our borders. Therefore, the military must be strong.
And that siege mentality is compounded by very direct, highly publicized threats coming from the United States.
Right. President Donald Trump has specifically threatened military intervention if peaceful protesters were killed,
stating the U.S. would come to their rescue and consider very strong options. I mean, that phrase, come to their rescue, that represents a massive escalation.
Oh, absolutely. It shifts the U.S. posture from just economic pressure to a near-direct military threat against the Iranian regime itself.
And the pressure is multi-pronged. Trump also intensified economic pressure, imposing these 25% tariffs on countries doing business with Tehran.
And crucially, he's also intensified pressure on Iranian allies like Cuba and Venezuela.
Why is that so important? Why does hitting allies like Cuba and Venezuela translate to pressure on Tehran?
Because it targets Iran's ability to get around sanctions, to maintain these strategic global supply chains. Iran often uses allies like Cuba and Venezuela for, trade, logistics, resource sharing.
So by pressuring those allies, the U.S. is tightening the noose, making it harder for Iran to get what it needs, components or foreign currency.
Exactly. So when we talk about preparation, Iran is preparing against military threats and this intense economic strangulation.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, You have this combination of extreme external pressure and deep internal instability, and that creates a highly combustible mix.
A very dangerous dynamic historically. When a regime perceives its survival is threatened from both within and without, its whole military calculus changes drastically.
Which is the perfect segue,
Yeah.
because the source material points to perhaps the most critical strategic shift of all, the Iranian doctrine of engagement and this looming threat of preemptive action.
This raises the really important question. When both sides believe war is coming, and one side is dealing with massive internal volatility, who moves first?
Because the information suggests both sides are mentally ready to initiate.
They are.
Well, let's look at Israeli readiness first. The Israeli military, the IDF, remains on high alert. They're preparing for surprise scenarios on all fronts. They're actively incorporating lessons learned not just from October 7th, but also from that recent June 2025 war.
And our material shows Israeli sources believe President Trump would absolutely follow through on his threats of intervention. That just ratchets up the risk even further.
But the most concerning shift, maybe, is coming from Iran's side, specifically about their doctrine of engagement.
Right.
The Iranian Defense Council has warned they will not limit themselves to just reactive responses.
And this is the doctrinal shift. This is what opens the door to outright preemptive action. They stated they will treat objective signs of threat as part of their security equation.
Explicitly opening the door to preemptive actions. It's a foundational change in their posture.
It is.
That means they don't have to wait for the first missile to launch. If they perceive the enemy has reached a critical threshold of readiness, an objective sign of threat, they reserve the right to strike first.
And those objective signs, what could they be? They could be anything from a noticeable mobilization of Israeli reserve forces to U.S. carrier groups moving into position.
Or even just specific intelligence gathering assets being deployed. It gives them maximum flexibility.
But also introduces maximum risk for miscalculation. One side's defensive move could look like an objective sign of threat to the other.
Exactly. And this convergence, Iran's new preemptive doctrine, Israel's heightened state of alert for surprise scenarios, and the constant U.S. pressure, it creates an extremely fragile situation.
The whole region is walking an ever-thinning tightrope, as the source notes. Any miscalculation can trigger that unpredictable escalation we talked about.
So, to summarize the urgency of the information we looked at today, we covered a formal declaration of an existential threat from Major General Hatami.
We confirmed 6 months of focused military adaptation, leading to these claims of being much stronger and better prepared.
We also detailed that political strategy of framing high internal dissent, these protests across 31 provinces, as foreign interference, really to justify a crackdown.
And finally, we highlighted the most dangerous strategic shift. Iran's explicit opening the door to preemptive actions at the exact same time Israel is on high alert for surprise scenarios.
It's clear that high-stakes international conflict often accelerates when a major power is dealing with acute internal instability. The desire to rally people against an external enemy when protests are raging is a potent and very destabilizing factor.
It forces you to consider the real motivation here. If you're the listener trying to assess the immediate danger, you have to weigh two major claims from our sources.
Right.
On one side, you have the boast that they are militarily much stronger and better prepared. But on the other, you have this desperate political need to quell profound domestic dissent by focusing the entire nation on an existential external enemy.
So here is the provocative thought for you to carry forward from this. In a region where both sides are threatening to cut off the hand of the aggressor and are actively considering preemptive actions, which factor poses the greater immediate risk of that unpredictable escalation? Is it the claim of being militarily stronger? Or is it that deep, immediate need to distract from profound domestic instability?
Something fundamental to consider as you follow these complex and volatile developments in the Middle East. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.